Why hello, Blair here of Chaos Costumes, here to teach you more about Nomad. Today's lesson, I'm going to teach you more about hard surface sculpting. It's not built for it, but we're going to do it. So without further ado, let's get going. Last week, we worked on these really sick potion bottles, but this week, we're going to make something cool. We're going to make some daggers. S, plural, two, we're making two, but we don't need this sphere, so let's get rid of it and add a tube. And what we're gonna do is lock the view with the grid and the magnet in the top right corner. This just makes it so it snaps to said grid and keeps everything straight. Now I want to curve the end of this little dagger, so I'm going to do it by zooming in, and I'll get a little finer control on the grid. And then I'll turn on B-spline to straighten out the curve. Now we're going to make the blade bladey by making a little diamond. So I'll use these little nodes, and when you drag them next to each other, it deletes them. And now I have a sick little diamond. Now I'll change the radius, so that I'm just changing this point here. I want to straighten it out a little bit. Now that I'm happy with that, I'll increase the division and validate it. Now I'll look at it from the top and change the symmetry to Z. And I want to trim the sides off. This makes it so it's beveled all along the edge, but flat in the middle. And then I'll narrow it more with the gizmo tool. But I don't want to go too thin, because we are 3D printing this. It's supposed to be a prop. Now let's add some more details. I'm going to go in with a cube. And I'll validate that cube, and we'll start trimming it. We'll trim off these corners here. And then I trim with a rectangle off to the side here. If you notice, it's not symmetrical on both sides, but we can fix that by toggling the Z axis. Now, it got a little bit sparkly, so I want to make sure I voxel remesh it, keeping sharp edges enabled. Now, I really want this to come down to a point. Just do that by trimming out this little area. And toggling my symmetry on both axes. Comes to this neat little point. I want to add some more details with a cylinder. And then reducing the faces so that I can smooth it by subdividing it. And that just rounds out the corners nicely. Now we're going to add a handle with another tube. Make sure the view is locked with the grid on and the magnet toggled in the top right corner. I'm going to curve out this handle too. Make sure B-spline is toggled. What I'm going to do is change the profile, and we'll narrow it on this axis. Now that I'm satisfied with the shape, I'll start changing the radius by toggling radius a couple times, and adding another point right here, so that I can curve out the very end of it. Just keep pushing and pulling things around till we're happy. And increasing the division to smooth things out. Make sure the snapping is toggled off on the top bar if you're going to do this by changing the angle further down with the handle. Now that I'm happy with the silhouette, I'll validate it. And go in with the trim tool to trim the bottom in the rectangle, just so it matches up nicely. Just want to make sure everything lines up nicely, and finally tuning it with the gizmo. So what I'm going to go and do is make a little frame for the handle. Kind of finely tuning this shape so that we can make a mask out of it. And to validate the mask, the little green dot, but we want to make sure the symmetry is correct. Now that's what we want. Now that we have that masked off nicely, let's invert it. Now we're going to extract with fill toggled in the thickness that you would want, so that we can add more details. So you get this sweet shape that is exactly like the shape that you made, but slightly bigger. And I'll use the little beaker tool up here to globally smooth that shape. We're going to clear the mask on the original shape, and then go in and add striations for the grip. We're going to do that with the mask tool. Let's just make a tiny little rectangle. Hit the little green dot to validate that. I'm just going to keep using this rectangle and move it around as I need to and keep adding little grip parts. Now that we're happy with the hand grip design, I'm going to invert the mask. Use the layer tool with symmetry turned off to carve in these little striations. To make it symmetrical with the Z-axis toggled, we'll force the mirror. Now we can clear the mask completely. Increase the multi-resolution to smooth it out a little bit. With the universal smooth under the beaker, we'll just smooth that out. I don't like these little peaks here, so I'll use the flatten tool to fix that. Now I'm just going in with the pinch tool and going back and forth with a pretty big brush and pinching those gaps together. I'm seeing that things got a little weird on that side, so I'll just force the symmetry again to fix it. To make smooth a little bit more effective, we're going to decimate this shape. And then when I go to smooth it, it reacts to the smooth tool much more effectively. It seems like if I voxel remesh it, it'll fix some of the geometry, and then I'll decimate it. Going back and forth like this is very effective. Now I don't have to fight those peaks as much. Now that I'm happy with the grips and the handle, let's add some more flourish. So I'm going to go in with the mask tool again, and just catch the very edge of this shape. You click the little green dot to validate everything. I'm pretty pleased with this border, so I'm going to extract that shape. I'll use the smooth tool and move tool to perfect it. Then I'll voxel remesh it just to clean it up a bit. And just keep smoothing it down. Now this handle needs a little bit more details. Let's go down here and add a sphere. The sphere is too big, so let's make it smaller and a little bit narrower. And I'll clone this over to the side here, validate it, and then use the trim tool in the circle option of the ellipse and turn auto validate off so I can see what I'm doing. We're making little moons, little crescent moons. My favorite. Just trim out the center of that sphere and then add a mirror modifier to it in the correct orientation. Where did you go? It's right here. I hid the layer for some reason. Now we got a cute little moon phase situation going on down here. Now I want to add something really cool, and it's a nice little trick. And we're going to do it with a tube with the snapping turned on and the offset really low, so it's 10%. And we'll just draw a tube along the edge here. And there will be far too many nodes. Paid no attention to it. We can always reduce the amount of nodes. I want this to be more linear, so we're going to use that trick where we turn on the grid and the little magnet in the top right corner, but turning off snapping and the top menu here, and then you can snap it to the grid. You have to select the little cube face also to enable the little magnet. Now I can move it up a little bit now that it's straight. And then in order to make this really interesting, we're going to make a little clover shape with the profile. So this clover shape is going to make a really cool rope with a neat little trick. So we're going to toggle the twist option twice and go down to the tube over here. And we just twist it around and it makes this cool little rope texture. And I'll increase the division to smooth it out a little bit. Now that I like this rope, we're going to add a mirror modifier to it with both X and Z toggled. I just want to meet up these ends. You can put a little detail there if you want. Now that I'm happy with this little rope detail, let's add another tube. I'm going to rotate these with 90 degrees snapping enabled. And in order to make these the shape that I want them, I'll toggle radius a couple times to get those options. I'll tap the center node to sharpen it up, and then reduce the faces quite substantially. So that if you reduce them enough, it makes this cute little diamond. I just push and pull this around until I get it just right. I'll validate it and use the move tool to get it to line up. Now that I'm pretty pleased with that design, I'm going to add a little border around this shape. The same logic using the mask tool. Then I'll just use the rectangle on top. Now I'll invert the mask, and I'll use the layer tool to build out this border. I'll go in with the universal smooth just to smooth it out a little bit. I'm thinking, however nice this looks, the handle needs a little bit more pizzazz. So let's go into Procreate. Change the background to black, and use the technical pen to draw out some filigree. The logic of filigree is S curves and C curves. And little offshoots. Pretty simple way to make an alpha stamp. And then I'll duplicate this layer numerous times, and we'll use Gaussian blur in different levels, making a gradient. So I decrease my Gaussian blurring by about 2% each time. So we go from a higher amount to a lower amount, but I usually don't go far past 16% as my starting blur. I'll pinch all these layers together, and then Gaussian blur them one last time. What is this? This little dot. Get out of here. I didn't agree to you. Alright, now we can save it. Let's swing back over to Nomad. We'll go into Stamp, and import our new stamp. Now we want to make sure the mesh is nice and dense, so let's voxel remesh it higher than you think you should. And lowering the intensity, I find it best to go down the middle. I'll get the texture mirroring but not overlapping. And then you can flesh out the sides. That looks extra fancy. So now let's just join all the mirrors, making sure it's toggled correctly. So the center one just needs to be on the z-axis. And we just want to join everything in the scene menu before we join the handle together. Otherwise the mirrors get real weird. So I'll just select all of this. I'll join it. Then I'll decimate it. And then make a copy of the blade. And make it bigger. But since we've pushed and pulled this around, we'll need to bake it first before we get access to the orange bar here. And I just want to make it 1.02 units bigger. And that will just make it so that when we do cut it out, we'll have a lot more clearance. When we go to insert the blade, we'll just boolean that out. Now we have a juicy little gap where our blade will insert. And you can see there's just a little bit of clearance. And I'm noticing here, I just want to smooth this out a smidge. Now we need to cut the handle in half so we can print it flat. So to do that, I'm going to add a cube, or box, as they call it, and turn on the snapping to grid, and also turn on snapping for the gizmo. I'll move this over, and you can see if I have snapping toggle on the left-hand side, it kind of moves along the grid a lot easier. Now I can boolean out that shape. We have our knife half. Now if you notice here, things got a little weird, and that's because I joined everything instead of voxel remeshing it together. I can smooth this out, but it's still not perfect. So let's voxel remesh this really high with sharp edges enabled and see what happens. The details are okay, but there's some issues in here. So this is telling me it truly would be best if I voxel remeshed everything before I trimmed it in half. Now I can decimate it down, so that when I do go to boolean it, it doesn't crash. Now this interior geometry is a lot more successful. There's just a little piece of geometry that's getting weird over here, so I'll just smooth that out. Now that I have this delightful half of the knife and the blade that will socket in, I'm ready to actually name my layers finally. I don't know about you, but I just find it a waste to name anything until you're done, you know? But to each their own. And hide those layers. Because we're making a new knife.
That's not a knife, that's a knife.
With tubes. So once again, we'll turn on the grid, unlock the view, and toggle the magnet. Once again, make it a little diamond. We're going to make this diamond a little narrower. Then toggle the radius a couple times, add a node right towards the end, and sharpen this little guy with the radius. Now that I'm happy with this little blade, I can narrow it a smidge with the gizmo. Now we're going to add another tube. Wow. This tube's going to be the handle. And then we're going to do that cool thing that we did along the handle of the other knife and make it into a little clover shape. You can tap the nodes to round them out if you're having trouble. Now that we have this clover shape, we'll toggle twist twice and twist it around and increase the division so it's nice and smooth. And then we're going to toggle the radius a couple times and add more points so we can taper this little rope shape. Now, what we're going to add is another tube. And we're going to make this tube into a pommel. Reduce the division to make it diamond-like. Make it longer, add another node in the middle, and then change the radius a couple times so that we can make it into a diamond. And we'll tap the center node to make it sharp instead of smooth. I want to make sure snapping is turned off when I adjust things. On the top menu up here. Now we're going to add more details. With what? You guessed it. It's another tube. I'm going to make the crossguard with this one. Now I'm going to change the profile on this to make it square, then add a mirror so I can see if I'm getting it just right. I'll just use the gizmo to make it a little narrower and increase the topology. This blade's looking a little wimpy, so let's make it a little bigger. Now let's add another detail. Can you guess what we're going to add? Another tube! That's right. And reducing the division, make these little diamonds on the end. And we're going to add another detail. I'll give you a minute to guess. We're adding a box. This time it's a box. Actually, I hate it. I hate the box. 0 out of 10. Let's get rid of that box. Let's add, we'll wait for it, a tube! Tubes are way better. Tubes are way cooler. I don't know why I chose to use a box. That's silly of me. Tube supremacy! I can just reduce the division and make it a box I can control and rotate it by 45 degrees. Now I can mess with this box's radius like I couldn't before. Now let's add another detail. With what? I'll wait. That's right. A tube. This video should just be called Fun with Tubes. Here to create a nice transition. So I want to add a little detail on this handle, and we're going to use a similar technique from the other dagger. I'm going to mask this portion off to make a neat little border. And validate that mask. I'm gonna do is with the layer tool, just carve in that area. And then while that mask is enabled, we'll go in with the stamp we just made and stamp inside of here. Probably messed up the backside, that is correct. So I'll just force the symmetry to fix that. This design is really simple yet effective. I'm gonna do what we did with the other dagger and join the mirrors. Hide the blade. Select all this nonsense. Join it. Double check everything went well. This time we're just going to go straight into voxel remeshing it with sharp edges enabled. And we'll decimate it back down. Clone that blade. And then in the gizmo, we'll bake it. Close out that menu, open it again, and you get that orange bar. And we'll make this 1.02. And if you're having trouble enabling it, make sure you have numerical input toggled in the bottom. Now we can take the handle and the enlarged blade and boolean out the blade. Now we'll add a box to cut this in half, just like we did with the other one. You 100% want snapping enabled for the gizmo on the left-hand side with the grid and the magnet on. That will make it so it's cut perfectly in half. We just boolean out this box. And now we got this half with blade inset. And the inset blade will pretty much act as a key, so it lines up nicely. Now we get to name this side. Just scale these up appropriately. So my hand is about 80 millimeters long, so I made a cube that's about 80 millimeters. I can scale everything up accordingly. I toggled the X-ray just so I can see what I'm doing and get it just right. Now we don't need the cube anymore. Bye-bye, cube. Box. I'm just measuring to make sure that this will indeed fit on my print bed. Now that this is the right size, let's save these components. So let's slice these bad boys. So we're going to select all 4 files, hit no, and select each shape, and lay on face is what I like to use. I'm going to add another plate so that these blades print separately since I want them a different color. And I'm going to clone this shape. I don't really need to mirror it to the x-axis, but I'm going to. The y-axis. Whatever axis, we just want to mirror it. It will matter more on the curved blade. So we'll clone that, and then mirror it. Now that I'm happy with the layout, I want to make sure the seams are aligned. You want to make sure support is enabled, actually, because there are hollow points underneath where the blade is supposed to go. And I'll choose mouse ear, so there's not a brim building around the entire thing, so it supports the sharp edges. Mouse ears just stabilize the really sharp corners that are likely to fail. Send this to our printer and see how it turns out. was a really fun project. I had a ton of fun making them, and who doesn't like pointy shinies? I like pointy shinies. I have decided to release my polished models on Cults, so if you want to just download the STL and not sculpt anything, the link is down below. If you like my video, please hit the like button. If you have any suggestions or any feedback, leave a comment down below. And if you really like what I do, please subscribe. Every little bit helps. I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.